I'm Dr. Alan Linders, and I am Aedynn's advisor. Have been for a couple years, since 2022 maybe. I did have her first in honors interpersonal, and it was a super great class. We had a taco bar, and it was a class. It was really fun, but I really enjoyed being Aedynn's advisor this whole time. I think she's a beautiful person, and she's going to be a great professional, whatever you decide to do. So this is a very exciting presentation. I love doing these honors presentations because they're all wildly different, very different. And so I had never heard very much about Danish culture before working with Aedynn on this, but it's very exciting, and I think you guys are really going to like it. Very appropriate photo to start us off with. And I have the honor of giving you these honors cords. A short person. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your engagement too. You're going to know it. Awesome. I'm very excited for you. Without any further ado.
Okay, so if we look at these pictures, what do you guys think about? Do you think warmth, cozy, peaceful maybe? Well, these are actually media's way of trying to describe this word, H-Y-G-G-E. Maybe you don't know how to pronounce it because it might look like it's supposed to be hige or hige or something like that, but it is actually pronounced hygge. Well, what is hygge? That's actually a pretty complex question, and it's a complex practice. So some of media's definitions are, it's a feeling of coziness and contentment from enjoying simple pleasures. Now that definition's from Wikipedia, so I wouldn't recommend taking that for its word. Some more respectable definitions are, it's an atmosphere and an experience, and that's from Mike Wicking, who is a researcher at the Happiness Research Institute, which we'll talk about in just a sec. And lastly, another definition is, it's a quality of presence and an experience of belonging and togetherness, and that's from Louisa Britz, who is also a hygge researcher. But why should we even talk about hygge right now? Well, it's not just some practice for those warm and cozy feelings that we just looked for, but it is actually very beneficial, and it is a part of Denmark's way of life, and Denmark is actually in the top rankings of life satisfaction and well-being and in happiness. And so if you see that they're among the top 3 for the last 10 years, you know that they're doing something right. Which is why they have the Happiness Research Institute in Copenhagen to research why they're among the highest rankings. And one of the main reasons is the practice of hygge. But if we really want to understand what this means and what it is, we're going to have to first look at, what do we do in our daily lives? What is our culture like, and what are the values? Then we will look at Danish culture and their values to see what differs, and so we'll compare the two. And then after we understand all that, we can then begin to understand what are the practices of hygge, what are the benefits, and how are we going to balance that into our daily life. So, American culture and values. America has 3 main values. We have individualism, competition, and action orientation. And these 3 come from a book called The Psychology of American Culture by Lena Hall. Now, if you look on any type of research on American culture, these 3 values are going to be in your research. So, first, individualism. What is it? It's you are responsible for your own life. You are the primary unit, and you can work for what you want to work for. Which brings us into the idea of the American dream. We have the freedom in America to work towards what we want to work towards, as long as we have the work ethic for it. And that leads us into competition. We see competition all around us. One of America's biggest forms of entertainment is sports. We're watching people compete against each other. Another way it's instilled in us is in schools. Starting in elementary school, you're competing against your peers in little games, but as you grow up, it starts to become not so much as a game. You are also competition at work, and because of that, if you're competing against others, you are going to work harder so that you can win. And that's where competition generates some great work among each individual. And also, competition is great for an adrenaline boost. When you finally achieve something great or you win, you get this heightened satisfaction of winning from that adrenaline. And lastly, the value of America is action orientation. This means in every single task that you do, you have to have a goal and you have to have a purpose. And because of that, work equals success. If you are working towards something, you are being successful. If you're not working towards something in your task, then you're a failure, according to the action orientation value. And when you look at this, you see that achieving increases your self-esteem, which increases your satisfaction with life, which is great, except for when you think about achieving a goal, you go up and you achieve it. You have high satisfaction. Now you have a new goal, and you're down. And so your self-esteem and your satisfaction is low, until you achieve another goal, but maybe that one has a few bumps in the road and you're going along this wave. So that means our satisfaction is a wave and it becomes unstable. Now, a few more things about American daily life is we have an accelerated pace of life. We are constantly trying to work so we can achieve the next thing, so these waves aren't so far apart, so we can have higher satisfaction for longer. So a way that we can see this is there's multiple researches of time studies of American daily life. And in this, we see that work is a constant. We are constantly using the same amount of work in our daily life. And that has not really decreased or increased in the past 10, 20, 30 years. What has increased is our time watching television. When you are not at work, you're at home watching TV. And because of that, we're spending less time connecting with people. And if you think about that, you're sitting at home watching TV. We now have increased technology, which means your work is probably on a computer and you're sitting at a desk. Meaning our health is full of sedentary activities and you're sitting down a lot of the day. So that's unhealthy physical health, but also because of our weight of contentment and satisfaction, that means our mental health is also not going to be quite as stable. However, going back to the beginning, that we have freedom and the ability to work towards what we want, we have the ability to change these health habits. But what are we going to change them to? This is all that we know. Well, let's look to a culture that has some higher satisfaction. So we are now going to look into Danish culture and values. So, the three main values of Denmark are egalitarianism, trust, and hygge, of course. So, what is egalitarianism? This is equality. Equality of worth, income, and gender. Equality of worth is that each person has the same amount of worth. When you are put on this earth, you have the same amount of worth as the person next to you. Nothing can decrease that, nothing can increase that. And that is shown through, no matter your gender or, mainly gender, your income is going to be the same. That's not going to change. And gender roles aren't really a thing in Denmark because each gender can do what they want because they have equal power. Moving on, we have trust. Trust is actually growing in trends in Denmark, but they have always been a trusting culture. And this is shown through their levels of hospitality. If you see anything about Denmark, they are very hospitable people. But this is inviting people into their homes, but not in a fancy house party, big dinner kind of way, but a more simple, caring, loving, just sharing their lives together kind of way. And because of this and the increased trust, they're really great at relationship building. And because you're trusting them, you're going to be more open with them, and so these relationships are going to be deeper. And lastly, hygge, which we, again, don't quite have the definition yet, but we will, trust me, I promise. But hygge puts all of these values of Denmark into one practice and encapsulates it all. And the origination of hygge was actually because Denmark has these long, harsh winters, and so they had to do something to combat that. We all know winter around here is not the funnest time, and you have to do something to find a little joy. Well, that was intensified in Denmark, so that's why hygge had become such a great practice for them. So now we know American society, Danish society, so let's compare. First, the similarities. Now, Christmas. It's actually a huge similarity between the two countries. We both celebrate Christmas about the same way. Christmas is a family-oriented holiday. You take time to stop, slow down, and no achieving has to happen during Christmas. You only have to watch Christmas movies, and drink hot chocolate, and cuddle up by a fire, and that's it. No achieving whatsoever, and that happens in both America and in Denmark. Another similarity, which is probably worldwide, but also in the case of America and Denmark, there's the human need to belong. Everyone wants to feel connected to something and someone, and they want to belong. The feeling of loneliness is in everyone, and is very harmful to your health, so if you want a healthy lifestyle, you need to have the feeling of belonging. And lastly, a similarity is our low power distance. Both America and Denmark, because of the equality and the freedom to move and grow in your work ethic, means that we have a low power distance. But there are more contrasting things than similarities. So first of all, in America, home is our escape. It's our safe haven, it's our private residence to escape from the outside world. Whereas in Denmark, a home is a frame. It's the frame of your life. It's how people can come in and see your life, and it's how you live your life. And that's what your home is. But another contrast is action versus being. So like I said, one of the values of American society is action orientation. You have to be doing something, working towards something. Whereas in Denmark, if you're not actively achieving, that's okay, as long as you're being with others, being with yourself, or being at work. Another contrast is America has the value of competition, like we discussed, but Denmark has the value of cooperation, where competition, each individual is working hard for a greater result, whereas cooperation, they're creating a synergy, working together to make one big, great result. And lastly, the contrast of materialism versus natural. In America, especially with our growing trend in watching television, media is feeding this amount of things that we should buy or add into our lives, whereas in Denmark, they are more content with the things that they have, and they'd rather have something homemade, personal, made out of a natural, organic material, and fill their homes with that kind of stuff. And that adds a bit of meaning to their lives. So what do we notice when we compare the two? Well, we see that America has the value of working hard, and that's great. And the freedom of this country makes that an amazing value to have. However, when we look at our satisfaction levels, we see that in America, we're always trying to find something that's going to satisfy. We're looking at all the self-help books, we're doing all the things, but it's just not quite working. So, if we look at another society, like Denmark, who's a bit more casual, community-oriented, and maybe that's not your style, and it doesn't have to be. You don't always have to be calm, casual, cozy. However, if we do take pieces of Denmark into American society and make a blend or balance instead of trying to assimilate both, maybe that's where the key is at. And how is that done? Well, through the practice of hygge. And yes, we're finally going to define it now, I promise. But first, a disclaimer. Some people think that hygge is a seeming utopia, that it's an unrealistic way of life, that you don't have to do any outside things, or life is perfect. And no, that is not true. Hygge is actually better because we have a chaotic, crazy life, and if we have a moment of hygge that's peaceful, that contrast is what makes it so great. So some images of that in our mind before we move forward is think about reading a book when it's storming outside. You have a thunderstorm that's chaotic right outside your windows, but you're inside, cozy on a couch, wrapped in a blanket, reading your favorite book. Or if you think about a quiet morning before your start of your day, right before anything chaotic happens, or maybe if your kids wake up or you have to go to school, none of that's happening yet, it's just a quiet morning. And lastly, if you think about Christmas compared to your daily life, especially being a student right now, the finals are ramping up, it's crazy, it's busy, it's chaotic, and then Christmas, where you get to stop and breathe. So, hygge. A big part of hygge is authenticity. You have to be your authentic self in an authentic moment. You cannot achieve hygge. It cannot be a checklist item. Hygge is more about the process of doing it than actually the moment itself. Also, perfection kills. You can't try to perfect hygge because then you're not being authentic, because none of us are perfect. That brings you to the idea that hygge is very casual. You're yourself. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be dressed up, dolled up. It doesn't matter. And also, if you're being your authentic self, that means you're allowing others to fully know you. And if you're being fully known, you're creating relationships. And in these relationships, if you're being fully known, it becomes a deep relationship. And if you have deep relationships, you're going to be truly satisfied. Because satisfaction in relationships only becomes truly satisfied if it's a deep relationship. You can have all these touch points of people throughout your life that you might know and say hi to, and those are great things to have, just to have happiness in your daily life, but to be truly satisfied, you have to have these deep relationships where you're fully known and they're fully known as well. And some ways to do that is through communal activities like going for coffee together, sitting down for lunch, maybe going to the grocery store together. If you go to the grocery store together, you're doing something that you have to do anyways, but you're adding a little bit of meaning to it. You're taking a mundane, simple task and adding some meaning and adding some joy by doing these things together. And that's a lot of what Hygge's about. It's about being intentional and creating meaning and joy in all the simple things in life. And that brings us to one of the other big things of Hygge is intentionality. If you're being intentional with your people, intentional with the time, and you are slowing down, that's when you finally get that moment and that feeling of the warm and cozy that we kind of saw at the beginning. So all these together make up the practice of Hygge, and we'll see a bit of what that looks like practically, but why should we even look at that? Well, Hygge has many, many benefits. First of all, for health patients, there have been multiple research studies done about the practice of Hygge interwoven with the lives of cystic fibrosis patients. So patients with cystic fibrosis have to do these multiple hours of therapies and maintenance in their daily life, and that can be really hard on their mental health. However, when they're creating these intentional slowing down moments of Hygge, they're increasing their quality of life. And also, when they're doing Hygge, it's almost a rewarding experience. They're adding something to their life that they can look forward to and that they get to have, and so it releases this oxytocin, which then creates a cycle of, if your oxytocin is high, then you ease into the levels of trust, which allows you to be open, fully known, create a relationship, more satisfied, and you create this cycle of a more satisfied life. And that goes into the idea of community. And these cystic fibrosis patients have actually created their own communities. They have Facebook pages where they show their moments of Hygge, like they take a picture of the setup that they've made, or they post what they did into these things, and so they created a community so they're a little bit less lonely. Not only physical health, but mental health is also benefited. In the same scenario of the CF patients, they reshaped their mindsets. They realized that their disease did not define them, and their life circumstances didn't define them, because now they're looking towards life and the joys of life instead of the circumstances. And so Hygge allows you to reshape your mindset. Hygge also decreases the amount of loneliness. Like I mentioned multiple times before, you're creating deep relationships, being authentic and being fully known. And decreasing loneliness means increasing sense of belonging, which every human needs. Also, this may seem a little silly, but it's actually a huge thing, is lighting. So if you think of these overhead lightings, or think about lighting in a hospital, that doesn't make you feel very good. But if you think of being at home with a lamp and some Christmas lights on, then you get a better feeling and your mental health is increased. Also, with the practice of Hygge, your contentment is increased, which means your confidence is increased, and this means you can have a bit more control of your life because you are confident to take steps that you wouldn't have before. But also, you have control over your life by rejecting consumerism and the media, because a big part of Hygge is that you don't need more stuff and you can be content with your own life. So you don't have to buy new things. You don't have to listen to the media telling you the things that you need. You can reject all that, stop, and be content with what you have. So, with those benefits in mind, how are we going to do this? How do you practice Hygge? Well, let's see. Lighting. Told you it was important. A big part of Hygge is candles, fires, and lamps. What a big part of the lighting is that when these smaller amounts of light are turned on, it creates a circle. And it creates a circle of light, which creates a space, even in a larger space, and allows people to congregate into this light and create a deeper moment. And also the warmth of these lights is a way of adding an atmosphere for you to enjoy the warm and cozy feelings. Also, like I mentioned before, having relationships. A big part of truly having some of these relationships is creating time for people. Some people are waiting for you to ask them to go do something, and you might be waiting for them to ask you. Just be the first to ask. If you really want these relationships, you're going to have to create the time and be intentional to have that time. Also, what are you going to do with each other? Well, like I said, you guys can do a craft to have some rewarding novelty in your life. You guys can go to the grocery store. You can sit down for coffee, because coffee gives you something to do with your hands, so things aren't so awkward, and it's also warm, and it tastes great, so it's a great option. Also, a big part of relationships is be authentic and be intentional. Intentional with what you say, how you treat them, with your time, but also be authentic. Let them know who you are, and let them be authentic as well. Another part of hygge is care for something. Care for something outside of yourself that makes you see that life is greater than just what you're achieving, what you're doing, but life is so much more. So what are ways you can care for other things? Well, you could be a plant parent. You could get a plant, water it every day, watch it grow, maybe talk to it because I've heard that helps them grow. That's a great option. Another thing about that is gardening. Maybe you have to weed the garden. You then get to see the fruits of your labor because now you have freshly grown tomatoes and jalapenos and green beans that you get to cook with, and that is really cool. Another thing of caring is cooking and baking. And a big part of hygge is the slower, the better. So if you have stew that takes a lot of preparation and it sits on the stove for a long amount of time, that's very hygge. But if you want to up it up a level, invite people over into your home and enjoy the stew together around the table with some intentional time. And maybe light a candle in the middle, then you have peak hygge. Also, baking. The baking of sourdough makes you stop. You have to feed the sourdough, make the bread, let it rise, let it bake. This all has to be done in a span of many hours, but that means you have to slow down, stay at home, and bake this bread in a labor of love. And lastly, like I said, you have to slow down if you want hygge. You have to slow and you have to stop. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the comparisons, Denmark is a very being country. So if you spend time being with yourself and with others and being present in the present moment, that is when you find hygge. If you stop, we all know there's going to be more life to do, more things to achieve, but to take the moment to stop and to just be. And also if you want to be in nature, that also reconnects you to the outside world and with yourself and just makes you realize life is more than just you. So, this is how you do hygge. And these are all little add-ons to add to your daily life, so it's minor adjustments to make a big change in your life satisfaction. So I hope that the next time you see a picture like this, you don't just think warm and cozy and peaceful, but you think, wow, that is two people who stopped and are spending intentional time together in a moment of hygge. Any questions?
How did you get interested?
I actually did a Bible study with some friends, and hygge was the main topic of it, and I found it really, really interesting. And I wanted to learn a little bit more, and so when the idea of an honors project was brought up, I decided to kind of dive into it.
What practice within hygge have you found to be most
Most hygge
for yourself?
for myself. Okay. Well, I did those in there, but hygge can be added into many words. Like it's a compound word. So for like hygge is more of a verb, whereas if you want it to be an adjective, it's called hyggelig. And then you can like turn anything and like Christmas hygge is like hygge Christmas or something. I don't know. There's a whole vocabulary of it, but I thought that would be a little confusing. Anyway, so something that's very hyggelig for me. Honestly, lately I've been enjoying like I mentioned with the contrasting, like a quiet morning, where you know that you have a crazy day ahead, but if you take time in the morning, maybe have a cup of coffee, that has been really peaceful, especially. Yes.
How do you see communication factoring into hygge, or is there more of a silence aspect of it?
I think communication right now, it's because hygge is so media driven, but in the wrong direction. So like the photos I showed at the beginning, people think that hygge is just the aspect of putting on fancy socks and a blanket and sitting by a fireplace, which it is in a sense, or it could be as long as that's the intentional moment that you're choosing. And so I think it'd be more of communications is we need to start changing the narrative, and so being more vocal on the media of changing that narrative, or doing presentations like this, or having more authors to write books about it in American society, because like a lot of the books that I found were from Denmark. And so having more things that are available here would be great.
Do you have plans to write a book?
If I think I could write that many words, I very much would.
Absolutely can do it.
Maybe a labor of love over many, many years, but
Slow.
I was gonna say, maybe that is exactly what it needs to be.
Do you have any thoughts on, Hygge's about connection, or part of it is connection, but what about those people that may have anxiety about inviting people to their home, or even connecting with people as other people? It makes them nervous, or they don't enjoy it, what do you suggest in that case? Or is there a place in Hygge for those?
Yes. What's actually really cool is in my studies I saw that Hygge is an introvert's dream. And so, first of all, you do get more moments of just being with yourself, and so you get that recharge moment, but then also, because it's not meant for large crowds, like you can't Hygge with so many people because that's more chaos than peaceful, it makes it a bit easier to wrap your head around as an introvert that you're only having one or two people that you're going to share your life with in a moment. And so whether they invite you to their house or yours, or even go to like a communal location, it's a bit easier to wrap your head around. And then if you both are kind of having that Hygge moment, the other person's also going to be very receptive of your feelings and kind of make it, just kind of ease you into having more connection instead of just having to jump into all these parties or social situations.